Welcome to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. I'm your host, Troy Hammond, and on today's episode, we're chatting with Lee Timutimu. Lee is the founder and CEO of Arataki Systems, which is a family-owned or whānau-owned IT company that he founded in 2016 with his brothers. On top of this, Lee does a lot of work in the community to help raise the profile of Māori and Pasifika in tech. And I think we're going to get into some really interesting conversations on how we can improve getting more Māori and Pasifika into tech. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with Lee.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning into the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
So 20 years ago, how did a young Māori guy then get into technology? Like, did you have role models that were already in tech? Or
none of that. Really took a non-linear path, I think. I was pretty academic at high school. Went to an all-boys Māori boarding school in South Auckland, St. Stephen's School. It's on the side of the Southern Motorway if you're heading in from the Bombay Hills down into Auckland. Did really well academically, left there as the dux of the school. Didn't really have any direction or motivation to do anything after high school, to be honest. So I was actually my accounting teacher that
What made you stop? So you go from like the ducks to then have no motivation?
I never had any motivation even at school. So I came from a single parent family. My mum raised myself and two younger siblings pretty much since I was 9 years old, so pretty much my entire life, and she's still helping me today actually with my family and my kids, so she's amazing. I'll give her, I owe a lot. But I think I never really wanted to be, you know how people would typically ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? You want to be an accountant, a policeman, or bloody whatever. I didn't have any of those aspirations whatsoever, and I don't know if that's because I definitely come from a lower socioeconomic sort of whānau and family. We were just happy to have jobs. Basically, if you had a job, that was you for the rest of your life, pretty much. You stuck with that job and you were set. But I don't really think we kind of had those lofty sort of aspirational goals. In some way, I think they're just normal, like getting an education, for example, going to university and pursuing that pathway, whether it be in tertiary study or whatnot. I didn't really have too much in the way of role models. I had heaps of support and love, like that was something that I did have, and so that really helped, especially when you don't have the male role model in the family unit, like my dad. He went off and did his own thing, all good. So I was kind of directionless from the get-go, to be honest, and so did really well academically. I think it was more so out of necessity because my mum was on the benefit. She was supporting me through boarding school, which at the time was like $4,500 a year. A lot of money, like so much money to a solo parent who's like getting like $250 a week to look after a family.
That's money.
4.
Even for me, man, like to pay kids $5,000 a year, right? Like that's
correct. So so I kind of I realized, oh shit, I've got to kind of work.
You got to try hard.
Try hard to earn these academic scholarships, and I pretty much did that from my year. They call it year 10 now, but fourth form, my junior year, I started applying myself a little bit more than I would normally, and to be honest, was just the bare minimum right to get through. It's not like I was studying really hard to excel to get like A's. I wasn't. I was just doing the bare minimum to get myself through, to get scholarships, and so that my mum didn't have to pay for these fees, which she couldn't afford anyway. So I'm really not sure if that bit of the plan didn't work. I'm not really sure what we would have done. I probably wouldn't have stayed there, to be honest. So so kind of did enough work to took over the scholarships to stay there, which is what my mum wanted me to do, which is what my family wanted me to do. I'm the eldest grandson. That's the other thing. My mum comes from a family of 14, 7 boys, 7 girls. All 6 out of the 7 boys went to the school. So it was a tradition, family tradition.
What sort of pressure is it to be the oldest grandson in a Māori family?
Yeah, it's. I'm fortunate that my family didn't put a huge amount of expectation, but certainly being the eldest grandson in any family unit, I would imagine is quite. There's a bit of pressure there and a bit of expectation. But for me, I was quite lucky that my family didn't really put a lot of expectation on me, but I put that expectation on myself, particularly because my mum, you know, she busted her ass to keep me there for one, or get me there, to keep me there. And then so, because she could see that it was just a better opportunity for me. I was getting into a lot of trouble, that's the other thing. Like I was getting into so much trouble just before I left to go to boarding school. So actually getting me away from whakatauki was a good thing, because I probably would have ended up in a lot of really bad stuff. I was going down that route anyway. So it got me away from home. Family tradition, be part of that sort of legacy, I guess you could say, and also being the eldest grandson, was like, oh man. So there was a bit of expectation that I put on myself, but I was just lucky that my family was very supportive and loving, and so I didn't, they didn't really push me.
So was it to be a role model for the next kids coming next, or was it just to show respect, or both?
Yeah, I think it's if I just look at my family, my intimate family unit. I was basically the eldest male in my family. Because my dad wasn't there, so I kind of took on that role as well, being not the father figure, but I had two younger siblings, so I really wanted to be that role model and be there for them. Because our dad wasn't there for us, and obviously mum was doing all she could to be our mum, and so there's so much she could do, and so I think it was just placing that responsibility on myself to be the main male figure within our family. It was difficult though, because I was away from home quite a bit, obviously boarding school, and so I'd come back, and it was difficult to sort of maintain any sort of consistent role modelling. But in saying that, and in hindsight, and my siblings would say this now, my sister's 2 years younger than me, and our younger brother, there's a big gap, 13 years, so he's in his mid-30s now. But they would say, even now, they would say, was really like you were that person, you were that role model, father figure, that role model that we didn't have, and all that kind of jazz. A lot of stuff going on in there, but I was academic, obviously had a bit of a half a brain anyway, and to be fair, it wasn't a huge school, like there wasn't a lot of people in my year, and I will always say that to, oh man, that's awesome, you're inducted, and I will say, typical me, like downplay everything, like, oh yeah, but there was only like 10 in our year, so it wasn't like it was that difficult, but actually they were pretty smart guys in that year, and so I just need to own that. So I left there, ducks of course, but stepped back a little bit, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it was my accounting teacher that said to me, because obviously I was just studying business accounting and economics, he says to me, oh, I think you should just go to Auckland University and study a Bachelor of Commerce, and I was like, okay, cool.
Why did he say that?
Probably saw potential in me. I was top of my year in those subjects anyway, so I guess that's why he saw potential in me. And he just thought I should go off and do a degree, which is all well and good. But I didn't really have, that wasn't me that made that call, or was someone else. And I just said, sweet as, I'm going to jump on that ride. I'm just going to go off to university. I went off to university and I failed. I tried to do Bachelor of Commerce, did 2 years, failed every paper. But also I was there with one of my best mates, so we were just getting up to all sorts of mischief, spending student allowance and all this kind of jazz on clothes and all that stuff. I didn't drink and I didn't party or anything like that. We were really living our lives, I guess. Racking up the debt. I met my first serious girlfriend at university as well, and we were doing all the same classes, so there was that distraction as well. But basically I wasn't really into it, to be honest. It wasn't really for me, and I realized now, much later, and maybe even a few years after that, I thought, well, I kind of just went to do something that I wasn't really invested in, and I wasn't passionate about, just because someone said that I should. And so it's not that I wasn't capable, not at all. Obviously I'm smart enough to be able to do that stuff. I just wasn't invested, and I wasn't passionate about it. I didn't really care, to be honest. So I didn't study. My story is, I didn't have a computer at home, so I'm not one of those guys that like his parent like bought him a computer and next minute he's building like 10 different computers and finding, starting to code and all that jazz. Like we couldn't afford a computer, we couldn't even afford a car, let alone a computer. So the first computer I think I remember seeing and operating was at high school. So I didn't really have any interest in tech, to be quite honest. But what happened was I ended up failing university, got a job in hospo, decided to go with my girlfriend at the time to London, do the OE thing.
Yeah.
Did that. Then she decided she wanted to come back to uni to finish off her degree, which she did. So I followed her home, just looking for a job, fell into radio broadcasting. And this is where my journey began, was in radio.
So as a voice, as a radio voice?
As an announcer, as a producer. So, you know, I've kind of always been around this type of gear. And actually, currently I'm the technology advisor to Te Māngai Pāo, who's the Māori Broadcasting Funder. So that's something cool that's kind of circled me back around.
Man. Yeah.
Full circle. So I've always been involved in radio, always. I started in radio, specifically iwi radio or Māori radio broadcasting. So I've got that's kind of where I started my career, I guess. And then I kind of just fell sideways into administration of systems, and then I kind of started working for the IT service provider.
Fall sideways? Did you just from using the technology kept going?
Absolutely, yeah, because even then there was a certain level of technology that that you needed to run, you know, a radio show. So much more nowadays, honestly, so much more. It's quite different, the landscape now. So you kind of had to learn how to use these systems, which were all digital-based, technology-based at the time. And so I kind of just got more interested in that, got more involved in the administrative and ops side of things. And obviously with that comes a whole bunch of tasks and responsibilities around systems administration, got interested in that. Yeah. Then I realized, actually I quite enjoy this, you know, because there's a few things in it, troubleshooting, problem solving, lateral thinking. These are all things that naturally I possess just through many things, but that's kind of what I mean by falling kind of sideways. Then I had to work with our IT service provider at the time as the administration manager, and so got more involved in understanding the systems, like things like key swipe security systems, except they weren't card based. They were like these old bloody plastic thingies you put in and out of these readers. Anyway, and then they got me more involved in some of the technical sort of other systems, and then they offered me a job eventually.
Is that because you showed interest or someone saw something in you?
Both, I think. Yeah, because I was motivated and keen, fast learner, interested, and obviously with a bit of a aptitude around the technical stuff, problem solving, all that kind of jazz. So I think they saw potential. But it wasn't just the technical stuff. I have to say that my first sort of IT boss, and we're still good friends now. In fact, he's been one of my mentors throughout my lifetime, actually, and he's been there at certain points of my life. His name's Simon Jackson. He actually lives here down the road. He's got a flash apartment because, you know, he's a flash guy. But he's got an apartment just up the ways, and I don't know which lane, but he used to live in Auckland, but he's living in Wellington now. He runs a company called AVC, Audiovisual Consulting Group, who I used to work for a number of times. So I'm kind of like a repeat offender in terms of working for them. But he did notice some potential in me, and obviously that's why he
invested in you.
Yes, but the other thing that he saw in me was my ability to engage and communicate with people at that human level, you know. So that's why I've managed to carve out a successful career in the support services space, because I apply these concepts that are natural to me as a Māori person, and Pacific people possess these same qualities, and you're probably familiar with these things about. We talk about manaakitanga, which is genuine care for people. Yeah, that's just the natural thing, right? We talk about
DNA, right?
It is. It's baked into our culture, basically. And so, having been raised with all of those really important concepts, whanaungatanga, so, you know, that kinship, that feeling of kinship, non-familial as well. You don't have to be related to have that kinship sort of connection, and other things. But I think that's what he noticed as well, is that I had a real knack for it, and of course that's why I was successful in that space, is because, you know, when you can, your job is to help people, but when you can help them and make a genuine sort of connection with the person you're trying to help, and it actually drops a whole bunch of barriers, and then
100%, man.
they become open to you supporting them and helping them, right?
Yeah.
So you'll be familiar with all these things. So, but I also enjoyed that part of it as well. So yes, the technical stuff is all good. Had an aptitude for it. But the thing that I've enjoyed most throughout my career is being able to help people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's kept me in it for all this time. And I'm able to take those same skill sets and apply it to my business as a small business owner when I'm creating relationships with anything I do. So that's whether it's within my business as a business owner or outside of my business as an advocate and leader within our Māori community. Same skills, different application, right? So different people, different audiences. So yeah, they've really helped me over the years, I guess.
Yeah, awesome, man. So you obviously, like, I'm keen to get into both your business and, what you're doing in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So you've discovered technology and then you thought you'd turn that evidently into a business, right? And so, like, what is your business for a start?
Yeah, so I guess to preface that, it took me a while to realize that I wanted to be a business owner or start a business, because...
Some might be so stupid enough to start a business.
Stupid enough is definitely accurate. But I also think it's about confidence as well and your ability and taking that step as well, because any entrepreneur will tell you, it's kind of like looking into the abyss, and it's very cliche, but actually it's very true, because if you're used to the typical way of working through employment by another organisation or company that pays you a wage, and that's and you do your mahi, and then you clock in, clock out, you get paid every week or month. That's very secure. Well, mostly secure. Probably not nowadays. There's a lot of jobs being lost in the tech sector globally, right? But anyway, traditionally you'd receive your paycheck. You'd keep doing it week on week and so on and so forth. So it's secure, more or less. And so that's fine. I've been through that, obviously, that process.
And cultural, right?
Yep.
So culturally, that's the norm, right? So there's probably less, going back 20 years ago or 15 years ago, less Maori people thinking about being an entrepreneur, right? And so...
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, there's a few barriers that prevent us from even aspiring to look into the tech sector in the first place, and we'll touch on those in a little bit. But, just even being in a position to consider becoming a business owner or an entrepreneur is actually, there's a few steps for us as Māori people and Pacific people as well. I always mention our Pacific cousins, but there's a few barriers and steps and challenges before we can even get to that position where we think, I'm going to go out and start my own business, and I'm going to start creating my own pathways, self-determination. I'm going to do what I want to do, and generally it's stuff that I'm passionate about, right? So, it's quite a big, there's quite a bit of a process before I got to that point as well. And I think what did it for me, obviously I worked for a few different tech companies, won't name any of them because it doesn't really matter. And then I've actually tried a few times to start businesses, but typically they've been social enterprise type businesses that look at things that I'm really passionate about, things like storytelling. So I founded a Māori storytelling collective 14 years ago now, and that was all about reviving our oral traditions, because the Māori culture is an oral tradition. It's about revitalising a lot of the ancient stories or pūrākau, or stories that we maintain as a culture and as a people. And it's about going out into our communities and sharing of that goodness with our kids, with our tamariki in particular. And that the light bulb moment that activated that particular kaupapa initiative was my wife and her grandfather, who passed away. So what happened was he had just started sharing with her all this rich history and story about their area where they're from, in Port Waikato, up country. And that was awesome. She was like, man, that's so amazing, because he never talks to me about anything, and he's telling me stories about that place over there and that place over there. A couple of weeks later, he passed away, and then we were sort of reflecting on it after we, laid him down, and then we thought, oh shit, that's real unfortunate, There's
just when you're getting the history.
Just when you're kind of, these elders or kaumātua that hold all of these rich stories, narratives, histories, are sharing these things with you, and then they pass away, and most of the times it all goes with them too. passes with them. So we saw that as a real problem, because a lot of our traditions and histories are set in those, embedded in those stories. So if we're losing them, then it's not a good thing. So so my response to that was to create this Māori storytelling collective, so we could get that all going. Pass it on to the next generation, hopefully identify future storytellers and so on and so forth. So we're still running that initiative today. So that's kind of an example of something where I'm passionate about something and I'll just go off and do something, right? But my actual business now, which is going to answer the question, is actually the convergence of two foundations that I've had for the last 15 to 20 years, which is storytelling and also technology. Arataki Systems is basically the combining of these two passions that I have, which is Māori storytelling and tech. So it's a family-owned business, so myself and my two brothers, and we started the business 6.5 years ago. I founded it, and I roped them in to help me. Essentially, we built a location-based storytelling app that unlocks cultural narratives around Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, it sounds really cool and like honestly, it sounds awesome and like conceptually and in principle. But as a business model, it's been completely so hard to make money basically. And although it's not about money, we do need to pay some bills. I have staff, not a huge amount of staff, but I've got to pay wages and all that kind of stuff. So I think the business model has always been challenging over the last 6 years. And
important though, man. Like as I said to you before, so I went to my brother-in-law's tangi, right, and I was really passionate as a Pākehā guy from Australia who has Māori kids to understand their lineage and their history, and I didn't know anything about it. And so I went to this with all right, I want to learn. And so I started asking a lot of people in the whānau, to tell me about my kids' history, and most people didn't know the stories, man. Most people just couldn't tell, and they felt so much guilt because of that. And it wasn't until some of the whānau from Whānau caves came through and they were like, hey, this is the history, and they just for 4 hours taught me through ancestors and areas and whānau, and I was just blown away. And the whole group around this tangi just started coming together and listening to the story, and everyone was just hearing it for the first time, because it was kept by a couple of the people. And so yeah, and I think it's a real it's a concern for me that as I mentioned, a lot of this history and stories that's so important to us culturally, and also just through whakapapa and our family lineage and genealogy and whatnot is so important. If it's if we lose that, what next? What do we do? How do we recover that? And so so I've kind of been in a little bit of a mission in that space. But then bringing together those two passions that I have to form this business that actually represents everything that today a little bit different, but definitely I'm still passionate about tech and storytelling, and it's something that I talk about often, and I'm still very passionate about. But it's just that nowadays, especially within the last 2 years, sort of moved more into sort of leadership and advocacy role within our Māori tech community, and there's certain factors that have led me to that, I guess, responsibility. Mm-hmm. So talk me through those, because why is it because of you feel like you're a role model now in the space that you need to help the next generation of Māori into tech?
Yeah, so I would describe myself as a reluctant leader. I'm not the person that, I'm not the leader person, if I can say that. I didn't wake up one day and say, yep, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to have a voice and I'm going to lead our community. No, I'm not a politician, definitely not. But as I mentioned, there's a few sort of events and sort of factors over the last 2 years in particular, maybe even before COVID, that have kind of put me in a position where I have had to take up that leadership role on behalf of my community. And so I've been reluctant in accepting that leadership role. And I have this conversation with many close and trusted friends, and also just people, when they ask me the same question. And so, and I think for me, it's a challenge for me to accept that leadership role. I've accepted it and I need to do the mahi, but I think more so it's a reflection of my self-worth and self-value and confidence even, and there's a bit of imposter syndrome in there as well. This is something that often circles back around to me and hits me right in the face often. So, but I have taken on that leadership role and advocacy role because I'm in a position now where people see me as that person, as the role model, as the leader.
Yeah.
There's relationships that I've formed over the years that have supported me being in that role. Also, the work that we've done within Arataki Systems itself in terms of our networking relationship building has actually created what I would say is a lot of mana within what we've built within that business, which is kind of transferred over to my current sort of role as an advocate and a leader within the Māori tech community. Basically, a lot of relationships and networks across all sectors, all types of organisations, as public, private, NFP, bloody philanthropic, you name it, all over the place, so that putting in a lot of the groundwork and forming those relationships has, helped, definitely. And so now it's, dare I say it, when people think of Māori in tech, they will somehow end up with me, and that's happening a lot more now. And it's more responsibility. It's me accepting that responsibility, but it's also me thinking, well, what the fuck's going on here? It's like, man, I was like 2 years ago, I was just a business owner, but now I've taken on another role.
Well, you're a pioneer, right? You were like someone who broke the norm to say, hey, I'm going to have a crack at this and do this, right? And then so these are thought leaders of any generation, of any industry, of any culture, right? People that break their cultural, normality and say, fuck this, I'm just going to try it and see it. They're the ones that we look to now for hope and guidance and say, well, if you can do it, you can teach others to do it, right? And so this is the same thing with Māori history, is just trying to pass down an education. And so rather than just passing down stories on Māori culture, now you're passing down on how to get into technology, right?
That's right. And it's so critically important because this is where I chuck the stats and on the table, but it's well known that Māori are underrepresented in the tech sector in New Zealand. So are Pacific. So it's like 4% is the statistic that NZ Tech had researched a couple of years ago, and that's the one that we often chuck around. And but whether that's accurate or not, I'm not really sure. But what we do know is we're well underrepresented now. You asked me the question about what was it like for me 20 years ago. When I was a young fella, there was fuck all around, to be honest. Like even, hardly anything. Like there were not many that looked like me, let alone any support pathways, digital apprenticeship pathways, vocational pathways. There wasn't any communities. There was nothing. Just about nothing, and so it's a little bit better nowadays. But
still not great, man. Like let's call it what it is, right? Like for me, so I just went through the recent government. So I'm a recruitment company, and government go through this all of government process, which is so for recruitment services. 30% of the tender was weighted on our ability to engage Māori and Pasifika into technology, right? And for me, that was like, that's the government actually saying, let's fucking do something about this now, right? Like pushing us to that. And that could be a little bit of vanity stats for, people to get on the process. But for me, I took that really personally because I have Māori kids that I want to, to go forward and do whatever the fuck they want, right? And so, but it's still like 4%. And it was like you and I were talking before the podcast, we're like, how many Māori tech companies are there, right? And you said you've only really just found like an equivalent 10 report that was
72 companies, that we've identified. And so, the numbers are against us at the moment. So it is about a lot of the work that I do and others in this sort of leadership and advocacy space is around visibility and representation. So visibility is incredibly important, I think, for us, because if you can't see yourselves in those jobs and roles, and even in sector, then you're probably less likely to head off down that pathway. We also know that we need to be inspiring and activating our kids much earlier than high school. So another social enterprise that I founded, co-founded, is called 𝘮𝘬𝘭𝘬𝘪, and it's a tech summit for Māori youth. So that's all about inspiring the next generation to consider pathways in tech.
Where's that held?
All around the country. It's publicly funded, so we can only do what we can with what we have at the time. So co-founded that in 2018 in Tauranga when I was living down there. We've delivered 13 summits in 12 different locations around the country. We've engaged with 2,200 rangatahi or youth and 120 plus schools. So that's another way that I'm supporting the next generation, but I'm also supporting that representation and visibility. It's essentially putting Māori tech entrepreneurs and Māori tech role models in front of our kids so that they can see themselves in those people, and then that kind of gives them the connection of relevance. And if they can say, oh shit, if Lee's doing it, I can definitely do it, because he's fucking doing that himself. Yeah. So it's very simple in terms of the messaging. If I can see success, I can be success as well. And then the second part to 𝘮𝘬𝘭𝘬𝘪, the tech summit, is we call it the activation zone. It's a place where we just set up like heaps of different tech, bells, gadgets, VR, bloody consoles and all that kind of jazz, and we just let the kids loose for an hour after they've had some inspirational, listen to some inspirational speakers.
Let them actually get into it. Yeah,
that's correct. So that's where they can have that one-to-one kōrero with the speakers, but also our industry partners. So we have the Microsofts and all those kind of people that come along and get amongst. So that's really important in terms of inspiring the next generation, because I certainly didn't have anything like that back in my day, and actually not even the last freaking 5 years. I think there's only ourselves and maybe 𝘬𝘢𝘬𝘬𝘢𝘬 STEM Academy that's doing similar work in that STEM space, but there's not a lot more, right? So but through that mahi over the last 4 years with 𝘮𝘬𝘭𝘬𝘪, we already know that we need to be inspiring and activating our kids as early as early childhood, like that early, for them to see this as a potential pathway for them from that young age all the way through out to high school and beyond. Because at the moment we target high school year 9 to year 13, I think. And we know they've
already got an idea on where they see their lives. Yeah.
Like NCA, you've got to be deciding what your NCA pathway is in year 9, year 10, definitely, because that's when you get down to the business side of study. So, we're kind of like, we know we need to be doing it earlier. Who else is doing mahi in this sort of digitech sort of ecosystem? Yeah. We've mapped all of that, by the way, which is pretty amazing. So I put together a bit of an ecosystem map that looks at all of the different initiatives that are supporting any pathway into STEM or digital or tech. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing, and kind of looking at who's on in the Māori sort of ecosystem, and there's not many of us. But there's a few. Yeah. Not a lot happening down the early childhood, early ECE sort of early years. So, it's a multifaceted challenge, to be honest. And but we're just kind of trying to work through different initiatives to solve some of these, or at least contribute to creating solutions for some of these really big barriers, systemic barriers as well. And mainstream education system is particularly, there's a systemic barrier there in that many of our Māori and Pasifika kids are streamed into non-STEM subjects. Yeah. So already it's a system thing, right? Yeah. So if we're not encouraging our kids in high school to consider a pathway into STEM, how the heck are they going to end up in technology, engineering, mathematics, or science, right? Yeah, so 100%. So we're having to contend with that systemic barrier. That's why it's even more important for the work that we're doing and inspiring our kids, so that we can kind of not break the system, but show them another pathway, show them another opportunity, provide them with another option that they can, sort of look into and pursue, because the education system's not telling them that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for a guy that's got imposter syndrome, self-proclaimed imposter syndrome, you're doing a fucking great job, bro.
Oh, thanks, bro. Yeah,
this is like amazing to hear. And so, what can people that are listening do? So talk me through, what do you need and what support do you need so that we can get Māori and Pasifika kids, thinking about STEM?
Yeah, so there's and that's a really good, and that's a good question. It's a valid question as well, because for non-Māori and non-Pacific, it's often the case of you don't know what you don't know, and it's not like you're ignorant. It's just that, oh well, what can I do to help and support? And so we've had a number of different organisations reach out to myself and also the communities that I am a part of, and I'll speak to those very shortly. But I think engaging is really important. But again, it's kind of like, where do you go?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you reach out? How do you engage? So I think two really simple ways that I can recommend is I founded an organisation called Te Mataro, which is basically the Māori Tech Association.
Yeah.
And again, this is another thing that's happened that's kind of put me in that leadership role, right? So CEO and founder of Te Mataro, the Māori Tech Association, 1.5 years ago. And that was purely out of necessity. We didn't have anything. We've had a couple of attempts over the last 10 years. The last effort at sort of bringing us together as a community was shelved like 5 years ago. It was called the Digital Māori Forum. And so I really just was looking for something myself. So, oh man, I'm doing all of this, like traveling around, meeting all of these people, a lot of the people that are other Māori tech business owners and Māori tech entrepreneurs, and we're having these informal conversations, and we're identifying all these challenges and problems. Damn, we need to pull something together, and I'm just like, okay, I'm waiting, I'm thinking, no, you can't start something again because you've already started a whole bunch of other shit, so your wife doesn't really want you to be starting another thing, but nothing happened. But I think what really pushed my hand was I had a bit of an incident. I'm pretty sweet with sharing this, but I had a bit of a public incident with NZ Tech. Now, for anybody that doesn't know who NZ Tech is, they're the organisational body that's representative of the tech sector in New Zealand. So we had a disagreement. We came together. We agreed to disagree, and then we moved on with our respective shit. But basically, what that did for me was it made me realise
they're not going to help.
Nah, and I'm not going to subscribe to them as well as a tech entrepreneur in New Zealand. I'm not going to jump on their waka. So what am I going to do? I'll just go off and make my own waka, right? And that's how Te Mataro was actually activated and born. And I'm so very glad that I took that step, because I knew it would be more work. I knew there would be more responsibility. I didn't quite realise that the leadership and advocacy mahi would come with it, but I should have known better. Anyway, today we're at 311 members, ticked over to 311 members, and that's a good collective. Although we will never have, I believe we will never have a consensus in terms of a collective voice for any community, let alone the Māori tech community. It's a good number, and I think it's fair to say that with 311 members, there's a fair amount of credibility and weight that comes with that. So. And what's happened is people outside of that organisation have said, oh, shit, we've got someone to engage with now.
Yeah.
Someone's pulled together a community. Bloody hell, and there's like 300 members on there. Cool. So we've got a lot of different organisations, and there's a lot of government ones in there, government agencies that are reaching out. Yeah. Corporates as well that are reaching out because they do want to understand our community better. They do want to engage in an appropriate and culturally, sensitive way. So that's my recommendation, is to reach out to Te Mataro. It's easy as we've pulled together a board of talented Māori people. We're just formulating our strategy, etc. And bearing in mind this is pretty relatively early in our journey as an organisation, but with a bunch of talented people in the board itself, including myself. I'm hopeful.
So the startup community, in my experience, first-hand experience, is genuinely wanting to bring more Māori and Pacific into tech, right? And it's not lip service. I speak to these people every day, right? We feel, I think the tide has changed in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board. People are starting to go, I get it now, right? Like I wholeheartedly get it. And so we see 4%, of technology is Māori and Pasifika. We're looking to change that. the struggle that they're finding is that they'll come to me, a recruiter, and say, okay, Troy, can you go out? We've got 20 roles here. Try and get at least 10 of them to be the Māori in tech. And I'm like,
it's tough.
All right, fuck, man. You know, this is a hard job. But I try and be strategic around. I'll say, okay, well, this is a remote company, so we can hire from any community, which is great, right? Any region, which is great. And then I might say to them, well, you know, look, obviously I'll go out and find Māori in tech, but also like, can we find some pathways into tech here? Like, where there's some of these customer success roles or support roles or whatever it may be, right? And so it's getting easier with companies that are helping us in that way. What I would love to offer up to our community and people listening is to get in touch with you, with your, you know, association now to say, well, not like there shouldn't just be that. We shouldn't just be inspiring people to go into customer support. You know, like give them all avenues, right? So let's get product people out to you to talk to the community. Let's get technical people out to talk to you. Let's get marketing people to come out and talk to you. Storytelling, man, it's like in your cultural DNA, and like marketing, Māori and tech marketing, you know, like for me is just it's a non-event, right? Like come in, it's just, that's what you do well. And so, you know, like, but the more we expose everyone from the startup community to what you're doing, I think the more chance we've got of people seeing like, yeah, I can fucking do that. Yeah.
And I think, like I said, people are really genuine in their intent to want to understand and engage, majority of people. You'll get the odd, you know, personal, individual organisation that's kind of just looking for that brown checkbox, and we're obviously not into that stuff. But the majority are really genuinely want to support and help, right? And like if someone asked me that question, you know, we're looking for, you know, 10 bloody programmers, and I'm like, well, shit, I only know 4 wahine Māori, female Māori programmers in existence, like myself, and I like to, you know, pride myself on being pretty well connected, and so immediately like, shit, man, there's none. You know, it's just like it's kind of difficult. But we have to start somewhere. So it's about creating those digital vocational and also apprenticeship pathways for our people, so that we can pathway them. And it's not just young people, it's not just rangatahi, it's transitioning peoples as well, right? Because we know with COVID it's pretty much smashed the hard industries, manufacturing, etc., which is typically where our people are working, but many of them want to be able to transition into a high value pathway, high value job pathway, like tech and digital, right?
Well, the good thing about STEM, man, is that you can make good money in STEM, right? Like, and it's not just like all the nuances of diversity. It's like we can give them an opportunity to make good money, right? And so
absolutely. And one of the things that I often share with when I'm out of my community, particularly with those people in whānau who aren't really familiar with tech, what I say to them is the median Māori household income is something like $56,000 per annum. That's the household income. The median wage in IT in New Zealand is around about $92,000 for an individual, right? That's one salary. So as you can see,
life-changing.
It can be transformational, and although it's not about money, financial well-being can certainly impact on other like social impacts and cultural and community and well-being, well-being in general, right? Being able to afford bloody food, man. Like how expensive it is to go out there to buy the food that we're told to eat, like vegetables and fruit. I mean, it's freaking ridiculous, right? So if we think about just at that level, it can be quite transformational and life-changing. So,
and like with tech as a remote, you know, industry, right? So you can live in the communities where your whānau is, right? And so that's important, right?
Yeah, and that's one thing that I do. I talk about a lot of stuff, honestly. I talk about a lot of shit, and it's just through experience and meeting and talking and conversating with my community. But, you know, one thing that I shared a couple of years ago was around what I termed the reverse urbanisation. So urbanisation was the process of our people having to move into cities to find jobs to be able to make a bloody living, essentially. And with that came a whole lot of social issues, right? So our people had to move from their homelands, from often rural communities or towns, to cities. Fine, urbanisation. But then there was a whole bunch of social issues that came with that, and typically they don't end up in manufacturing or hard labour jobs anyways, right? So what I'm saying is, like, reverse urbanisation through using the leveraging of technology and digital, we can see how people make a shift back home, where it's often cheaper to live, by the way. Cost of living is freaking way cheaper than living in a city, but be able to work remotely through and using technology to be able to work from wherever they are. I have a vision of marae becoming like technology hubs where our people can go and use them as co-working spaces to be able to do exactly what I've just described. So they can move home, they can be by their mountain, river, and ocean, to be able to live on the land, to be able to live where their people in whānau are from, their hapu, and live on the marae essentially, and make a living out of it, and quite a good living as well. So, these are things that I'm invested in trying to create those sort of opportunities. I think we've got a ways to go yet, but hey, we're getting there. The last thing that I want to share before we do wrap up is another community that I founded last year is called Te Hāpari Matiko, and it's literally means the digital community. So we looked at Te Mataro and it being a very straight up the guts tech focused community, or tech focused membership. A friend of mine, Katie Brown, and I co-founded Te Hāpari Matiko. It's actually funded by MB, the Māori Innovation Fund, and we wanted to go wider than just tech. So Te Hāpari Matiko is about a community that supports all Māori that are working in digital and tech. So when I think about digital, we think about things that wouldn't typically be looked at as tech, like creative tech, but also digital marketing as well. Anything online, right? It's like, nah, is it really? But it is, right? So we've formed that community, and that community is up to 265 members. So you can be a member of both Te Mataro and Te Hāpari Matiko, or you can just be a member of either. It doesn't really matter. But for me, it's about options. Yeah. It's about creating communities, about creating opportunities for our people wherever they want to end up or wherever they want to sit. And it's about, supporting them in the mahi that they're doing. And with that, also creating these opportunities, pathways, working with partnerships, creating partnerships with IT industry partners and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of mahi going on.
Yeah, how can government help more? Is there some sort of living wage that we can do to help Māori become founders? To create their own companies? Is there something that we can do there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the way I would respond is, firstly, as you'd probably be familiar with, the Startup Advisory Council was formed by government last year.
I've been agitating all of them to come onto the podcast. I'm not sure if you've seen on LinkedIn, but
there's one Māori tech entrepreneur on there, hugely successful. His name's Grant Straker from Ngāti Raukawa, an awesome fellow. I know him, good friend. And he's been in business for like freaking 20, 30 years even. So global company, amazing. But if you think about Grant, he's kind of, to me, he's there. He's like, man, he's like the Elon Musk of bloody, of Māoridom. He's too far away. We need to come back here at the ground roots level. And I'm not necessarily saying me, because I wouldn't really follow my business acumen, to be quite honest, because I'm shocking. But there's others that are more here on the ground with us that are either start up to, to growth. Let's have a look at what's happening in this level here, and let's use that to inspire other Māori to want to even look at startup or forming a company. I think the government, I know for sure that the Startup Advisory Council is trying to engage better with Māori to understand what it looks like for starters, because nobody knows what it looks like. I think the Troy Hammond report that I mentioned earlier, that identifies 72 companies potentially could be the starting point, but I'm not really sure, but it's something. And they're just trying to figure out how to engage with our Māori tech startup community to really try and figure out what the numbers look like, so that they can hopefully provide ways to support that ecosystem and growth, right? Because that's all about growing that startup community, because high value companies looking for the next unicorn, high value to the economy, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of good stuff that falls out of it, but just identifying Māori tech companies, man, straight up, it's pretty challenging.
We need to do something, man. We need to be able to do something to be able to show these people like Ez and the guys that we were talking about before, right, that are fucking innovators and doing things and challenging, breaking the norms, right? So that our kids see them and go, I can fucking do that. And that's, I don't know what the platform is, but I think the more we can converse about this, the more it creates opportunity for conversation, the more it creates opportunity that we can do something, right? And so... Yeah,
I agree. And I think it's about giving our people not a voice, but it's putting our people in front of our youth, our rangatahi, and just showing them that it's something that they can do themselves as well. And so it's role modeling, it's leadership, it's advocating for our people in all of these spaces. Today I'm here to attend the Digital Technologies Industry Transformation Plan Partnership Board meeting, so I'm a member of that board, which is actually quite a critical and influential board because it actually looks at all of the work streams that comes out of the Digital Technologies ITP, which is a key document for us here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Aotearoa New Zealand, in terms of those pathways, in terms of initiatives that look to improve digital and tech across the board, but also particularly the Māori and Pasifika support streams. So it's really an important and influential and key role. So there's work being done.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of coordinating a lot of that mahi and effort on the ground. And so I see myself being a bit of a coordinator, but also a bit of a connector as well, just because I am sort of roaming in so many different spheres.
And you're doing a lot, right? And I think what you're doing really well is you're giving diversity of opportunity there. Like, not just the fact that you've got tech, you've got digital, you've got everything. And I think, because that's what we all need, right? Not like any kid from any generation just needs any opportunity to be able to say, I can do that, right?
Yep.
What's your take on how AI and machine learning can change and influence in terms of the Māori tech culture?
Yeah, that's a really topical question, but it's something that I've been thinking about more and more in the last couple of weeks, actually. And I think that it's going to be the impact that AI and machine learning is going to have on the future generation, or on humankind in general, is going to either go one of two ways, either good or bad, basically. And I don't think there's going to be a middle ground. So I've been thinking more and more about how that's going to impact on Indigenous communities, but also obviously our Māori and Pacific communities here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think other than the key challenges that we probably already know exist in terms of racial bias and so on through the data, tagging and all that kind of jazz, and even the lack of data that is available that looks at Indigenous communities as well. I mean, if that's missing, then there's going to be exclusion. Yeah, through AI and other systems and platforms that are leveraging or using AI. So, my answer is, I think I need to become more informed and educated on the topic to be able to better understand it, to then be able to support my community to navigate it, because I think that's the next big fucking thing, man, is that AI.
100%. Yeah.
That's the next critical, I guess, stage of the fourth industrial revolution for humankind, is that it's going to make or break us, I feel. Yeah. And so I feel like, me personally, the more I can become educated and informed and become an expert, I guess you could say, on that, the better I can support my community in navigating the pathways that are ahead of us.
Oh man, AI half scares the shit out of me, half excites the shit out of me, right? And I think that's the problem, is we just don't know yet, right? But I think, like, what I'm excited about, especially when I think about like Indigenous communities coming into technology, is that, let's fucking be honest, man, like traditional Pākehā white dudes in technologies have tried to fucking disrupt everything, right? I think we're out of ideas, right?
Yep.
Like, there's nothing new coming now that I'm like, oh, mind-blowing, right? In terms of like maybe ChatGPT and some of the things. But like, a few people have mentioned this to me. Vaughan said it to me on the podcast last night, Vaughan from Bend. He was like, there's going to be these like cultural environmental products that we're going to develop because of new diversity of thought that are coming at it now. And so like that's quite exciting when we think about what we can do now with different views and different lenses, looking at how they can influence technology going forward. Yeah,
and I agree. I think if we look at Indigenous systems and their ability to live in harmony with ecology, ecosystems, with the environment in particular, these are 60,000-year-old systems. If we look at our Aboriginal whānau across the Tasman, they knew how to do things, and we've just gone and broken all of that, right? And within a few hundred years. So I think there's definitely a lot of value to be taken from Indigenous wisdom, for sure. And I think a lot of non-Indigenous organisations are trying to understand that, and I think they're coining new terms for things that we've been known for many centuries, if not eons, around kaitiakitanga or stewardship of the environment. That's something that we've been doing forever, but now it's sustainability and environmentally friendly and all that kind of jazz, which is cool. But there's a lot to be taken from Indigenous wisdom, man. Like, honestly.
I'm reading a book at the moment called Sapiens, which talks about, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals and Homo erectus and the likes, and where Indigenous communities come from and where, like traditional white people have come from and the likes. And it made me realise, man, like Indigenous communities have been innovators for so fucking long, right? They just weren't storytelling it like we have, right? And so, it's exciting, man. I think the exciting wave of technology that's coming from Indigenous communities for me is we should enable this, right? Like we should let everyone have their voice, because everyone should be able to be an entrepreneur. Everyone should fucking love startups, right? Like you should feel like you can do something. And so I think it's awesome, man, for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Nice.
And I could chat for another 2 hours, man. This has been real. I don't know how you can, because you've got no fucking time with everything you're doing, man.
It's all good, man. It's all part of the not job but responsibility. And I'm really thanks for inviting me along to have a bit of a chat. And I think just to finish for me anyway, one of the things that we try and remind our young people is that they come from a long line of innovators and entrepreneurs and technologists and disruptors, right? So even for us as young in Indigenous culture, as Māori, few hundred years old, our ancestors were traditional navigators. They navigated with effortlessly the Pacific highways, right? And they used all of that using traditional Indigenous wisdom, using the stars, and often across spans of vast ocean. So
waka, rarapa, like all these things that have lasted 1,000 years. That's correct. Man.
So it's like, you have that in your whakapapa, you have that in your history and your genealogy, and just know that you've got all the attributes, you possess all of the attributes that will innately make you a successful person, but also a successful entrepreneur. Because let's face it, entrepreneurship is about this. It is, especially tech startups. It's about innovation. It's about disruption. It's about technology in general. But we don't have to look too far from our own sort of culture and genealogy to see that we've got it all. We just need to be reminded every now and then, and go off and do the job.
And I think it's important that people listening know that every founder I talk to doesn't rate themselves as a smart, intelligent person, right? They're just like, I was just stupid enough to start a business, right? Like I was almost unemployable, or I just had this stupid idea that I couldn't get out of my mind, right? And so the fear of joining a startup, or the fear of founding a startup, building a product, being an innovator, being an inventor, you don't need to be perceived intelligent. You don't need to be, absolutely driven at school or whatever it is. You could just be, you could have this thought and you think, I'm carelessly stupid. I'm going to keep ignorantly pushing through this until I see if it works. We all come from different walks of life. We all come from different IQ, EQ in terms of strengths. And so it's one of those things, it's like a drug almost, right? Once you get into that industry, you realize, oh my God, I'm making something, right? And I think startups for me are when you come into an early stage startup, or when you found an early stage startup, you have a group of people around you that no one knows what they're doing. We're all wearing 4 or 5 different hats, but we're just making it up as we go along, and we're having a fucking great time doing it.
Because as we know, it's all about the person, right? It's not about the product or the business or whatever it is you're fucking selling. It's about the person. It's the person that rallies the people, right? So and as we know, investors, good investors will often look at the person rather than the product, and I know Vaughan is a really great example of that, but and others. So it's about stepping into that sort of role, having the confidence to do that, valuing everything that comes with you in terms of your life experience and your work experience, all that kind of jazz. But and I think just doing it is the first step. Honestly, it's quite a daunting moment, but once you get past that initial first step where you think, oh fuck, I'm gonna just go for it, jump and see what happens, and that's when the magic comes, I feel.
And just like me, ask 100,000 questions all the day to everyone, because you have no idea.
Because I'm no expert in anything, to be honest, but you ask questions, or you find people that you trust, that know, and you reach out to your networks, and so it makes, you got to bring your community with you, obviously, but and that's where I think Indigenous communities are really quite have a knack for working in that collaborative nature, collaboratively, as it were.
Because that's where I've always felt like community is the upper hand if you empower it, right?
Yep.
And like collective knowledge sharing, like the amount of IP that Indigenous communities could build because of the community element, right? Like phenomenal. Like once it takes off, it's going to get berserk, right? And
Yes,
I think it'll grow faster than any community.
I agree, 100%. So yeah, been good, man.
Awesome, brother. Hey, so like I always like to finish off on one question.
Sure.
Which is, what makes you happy?
Yeah, sure. So for me, the thing that makes me happy, the obvious one is as my primary responsibility as a parent, husband, wonderful wife, 4 kids, so obviously they make me happy. But the thing that makes me happy outside of my intimate circle with my whānau is, right now, is representing our community as an advocate and a leader, reluctant leader. That's the thing that really makes me wake up at the moment.
Yeah.
It gets me up every morning. I'm a business owner, but I'm also falling more into that sort of leadership and advocacy role, and so I'm being given a lot more responsibility and opportunity with that. But at the same time, it's something that's really making me tick at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm just so very grateful that I have a trusted network of friends and peers that support me with that mahi, but at the same time I'm only one person, so it's about coordinating a little bit more and sort of pushing a bit of that mahi out to that network, whether that be through Te Mataro or Te Aupō Matiko or anything else that I'm involved in, so that we share the load and we're collectively working towards the same goals anyway. So, but ultimately, well-being is pretty important to me, so I can only do so much. So it's about coordinating that effort, right? So look after yourself is probably a really key thing. I'm very open and transparent about my well-being journey. Pretty frank about it, actually, because I think it's important. I've been through my own challenges in terms of mental well-being, so we really just need to make sure that we're okay here and here, more here than here, so that we can do the work that we need to do.
100%, man. Like, we're all human, right? And I'm the same. So I told you before, so I was really passionate about my kids and understanding their whakapapa, right? And so I remember dating this Māori girl at the time, and she called me a name, and I can't remember it was like the torch carrier or something. There was a name, and I can't remember what it is, man, but I just felt imposter syndrome on that. She was like, you're lighting the fire or carrying the fire or something, whatever it was. And I didn't feel right about it. But, man, when I listened to your story and you are carrying the torch for your community, you're igniting a flame for future generations to feel warmth and light and give them opportunities. I can't thank you enough for coming on and telling your story and for the work that you do, man. So thanks so much, Lee.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite, of course. And thank you for that as well. Something that I'm still trying to overcome myself personally, but that's something I've just got to get over and just get on with it. So cheers, man. Kia ora. Thanks.
As someone with Māori kids, this is particularly special for me, this podcast, because I felt absolute energy from Lee. I felt Lee's mana. I felt his mahi just exuded from him in terms of what he's doing and why he's doing it. And there's something really special when you're sitting across from someone, hearing their story, and you believe every single word of it, and you're hung on the end of every sentence, and you just walk away thinking, I need to help that man. I need to help that community. We need to do more. We need to help that space. And so I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was quite special for me. I would love to speak to more Māori and Pasifika owners, tech owners and innovators, and I think this is our opportunity, and this is our privilege in that we've had the elevator right up for us, that we send it back down and bring the next generation up with us and the next innovators. And with 4% Māori and Pasifika in technology, let's increase that number. Let's do something about it. Thank you for everyone that's watching. Thank you for everyone that's subscribing. Please comment. please share wherever you're watching this. Please share it around so that we can increase our audience, so that we can have more young kids, whether they be Māori, Pasifika, anyone looking at this and thinking, I can fucking do that. Thanks for watching.
This podcast is produced by John Otaka from Empire Films.